Hi all! Welcome to Healthy Living with Dr. EE. Before we begin the event, please be reminded that the content is copyrighted. No recording or sharing is allowed. Let us all welcome our special guest for today, Dr. EE Zhang.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to listen to my talk. I'm so thankful to be able to have this opportunity to share all this knowledge with you.
Dr. EE, autoimmune diseases are becoming more and more common. Can you tell us what they are and what the best ways to avoid them are?
All right, so when it comes to autoimmune diseases, I feel like first we need to really understand what the immune system is. And our immune system is the best doctor in the world. We are constantly facing threats from the world outside of our body and threats from the world inside of our body. Yet we keep on living. We eat, we interact, we're exposed to all sorts of things that have the potential to kill us. And we not only survive, but we often aren't even aware of all of these threats because our immune system is so good at defending our body, at getting rid of all of these bacteria and viruses and other nasty things we might come into contact with. It's so good at getting rid of it before we even realize that it's there. That is what our immune system does. But if our immune system falters, then we start to have issues. Our immune system is responsible for fighting off infections, but it's also responsible for getting rid of mutated cells inside of our body that can eventually grow into cancer. So it's both defending us from outside forces and from defending us against inside forces. So when our immune system can't do its job right, we're susceptible to infections and to cancer. But when our immune system malfunctions, then we're faced with different diseases, such as autoimmune diseases or allergies. An autoimmune disease happens when the immune system can't differentiate what is foreign from what is self or what is your body's own cells. Allergies happen when the immune system can't distinguish between something that's harmless and something that's harmful. So something that's worth an immune response and something that's not worth an immune response, like a piece of flower pollen or a piece of peanuts. Now, if we have a healthy immune system, we can prevent many illnesses. It is believed that humans, we have a max lifespan. And a lot of us think that, 70 or 80 years old, that's a good run. But if we take care of ourselves, if we take care of our immune system, we have the potential to live so much longer than that. If you think about it, most of us, we don't die of old age. Most of us will die of diseases, and a lot of these diseases are preventable. But it's not just living to old age, it's all about the quality of life as well. We want a long and healthy life. And in order to have a long and healthy life, then we also have to have a robust immune system. But let's talk about autoimmune diseases, or what happens when the immune system sort of malfunctions. Autoimmune diseases occur when the immune system can't distinguish what is self and therefore safe and what is foreign and therefore potentially dangerous. Since the immune system confuses the body's own cells for something that is a foreign invader, it attacks the body's own cells, causing the damage and leading to the autoimmune disease. Now imagine your immune system a little bit like an army. The autoimmune disease is like blindfolding the soldiers of your army and telling them to go out and fight the war. Well, they're going to go out and fight the war, but they're not going to know exactly what they're hitting. So you're going to get friendly fire. Autoimmune diseases can affect one part of the body, they can affect your entire body. It really depends on the type of disease and the person. Unfortunately, having an autoimmune disease also means being at an increased risk of other diseases, such as other autoimmune diseases, chronic diseases, or even cancer. This is because autoimmune diseases, it causes all sorts of inflammation in your body, all sorts of damage to your body's own cells, and that will contribute to all of these other diseases. There's more than 100 different types of autoimmune diseases out there, often causing debilitating symptoms and long-term disability. Some can even be life-threatening. So if you take a look at this table, this is just some of the autoimmune diseases that you may have heard of. There's a lot more than what is shown here. There's probably more than 100 different types of autoimmune diseases. For example, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. It's a disease in which you get inflammation of the joints. A lot of people assume that if you have rheumatoid arthritis, then the problem lies within your joints. But the problem is actually the immune system attacking the joints. It's the same thing with other diseases like psoriasis or vitiligo. It's the immune system attacking the skin. So the problem there, it doesn't originate in the skin, it's originating in the immune system. It's the attack of the immune system on these cells that is causing all of the symptoms and all of the problems associated with the disease. For example, type 1 diabetes is the immune system attacking certain cells in the pancreas, so you can't produce insulin anymore, leading to the diabetes. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the immune system attacking the thyroid gland. Lupus is an interesting one. Depending on the type of lupus you can have the immune system attacking only certain parts of the body or the immune system attacking pretty much everywhere. It really depends. But unfortunately, autoimmune diseases are still a mystery to us. The immune system is still such a new area of study. It's so complex, it's so complicated that scientists still don't know everything about it. There's still so much more research to be done and so much more to learn. For example, just with the current pandemic, there were reports of some people suffering from a cytokine storm. And despite all of the damage it caused and scientists all around the world working on it, researching it, trying to figure out why it happens and how to treat it, we still don't know why. We still don't know why it will happen. We still don't know why some people get it and other people won't. For autoimmune diseases, it's very much the same. We have a general idea of the diseases and how they present, what sort of symptoms you get and all that, but we're still lacking knowledge on the specifics. Like, why does the immune system turn on your body? What exactly will trigger the autoimmune diseases? And why do some people get it and other people are spared? Now, autoimmune diseases are actually becoming more and more common over time. According to the National Institutes of Health, about 24 million Americans suffer from autoimmune diseases. Research done in the UK shows that autoimmune diseases are increasing in incidence by as much as 9% each year. Unfortunately, scientists still don't know why. A lot of people think it's genetic. However, studies into twins show that just having the same genetics doesn't mean that both people will end up with the same disease. So we're thinking now that environmental factors are more important than genetic susceptibility. Now, there's no cure for autoimmune diseases. Now, not only do these diseases put someone at greater risk of long-term disability, but they also increase the risk of other diseases, even cancer, because of all of this ongoing damage and this dysregulation of the immune system. Now, currently, we don't have a cure for autoimmune diseases, but we do have lots of treatments. The current management strategy focuses on controlling the symptoms and slowing the worsening of the disease. This means that since there's no cure, people are often on medication for the rest of their life, but oftentimes the medication itself has side effects. For example, immunosuppressing drugs are the mainstay of treatment. Although the drugs can relieve the symptoms, they carry their own risk, such as the risk of kidney or even liver damage. The greatest risk of immunosuppressing drugs causes the patient to become more prone to serious infections and even have an increased risk of cancer. Now, just imagine, let's go back to the idea that our immune system is like an army. Immunosuppressant drugs are like taking away the guns of your army. They won't be able to fight off invaders very well, but that also means that they're not going to be able to cause a lot of damage to your body's own cells, which is the root of the problem of autoimmune diseases. So if they can't cause damage to your body's own cells, that means that you don't get very many symptoms and you feel a lot better. But people on these immunosuppressant drugs, they're at increased risk of all sorts of infections because your immune system isn't working properly. So they can't fight off these foreign invaders either. So people on these drugs, they tend to get more severe infections, or they get infections that people normally don't get because your immune system would fight it off before it has a chance to, grow enough to have an effect in your body. Now, researchers have also found an increased risk of cancer among patients, for example, like transplant patients who are on really high doses of immunosuppressants. And it's not just one or two types of cancers, it's 32 different types of cancers with an increased risk. So it's a balance of the risk and benefit. Another drugs that are very commonly used are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, there are a lot of these drugs on the marketplace. For example, you walk into any drugstore and you can get it. Ibuprofen, naproxen, all of these drugs, they are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Now, they're commonly used as painkillers. For example, like you and me might use it for treating a headache. But since it also reduces inflammation, it can help relieve a lot of these symptoms of autoimmune diseases. However, they do come with side effects such as an upset stomach, high blood pressure, fluid retention, gastritis, which is inflammation of your stomach lining. It can affect your blood platelet function. It can actually give you a headache, increased risk of heart attack and stroke, or skin rashes. But the more serious side effects can include bleeding in the stomach and worsening kidney function. So with all of these drugs to treat the disease, it does make someone feel a lot better. It does get rid of a lot of the symptoms. But just because someone feels better doesn't mean that they don't have the disease. The disease is unfortunately still there. Now, there's a lot of risk factors for autoimmune diseases, so let's have a look at them. Unfortunately, being female is one of them. Genetics. Some diseases like lupus, they do tend to run in families, but it's not a death sentence. If you have the genetic susceptibility, it does not mean that you will definitely get the disease. Certain viral and bacterial infections, nutritional factors, for example, being overweight or obese or eating an unhealthy diet, lack of physical activity, the Western diet, environmental triggers, or having an autoimmune disease. Having one increases your risk of getting another. But another thing that scientists are very interested in looking into are our gut microbiota. There's a link between your gut microbiota and autoimmune diseases. But how exactly does it link? We're not quite sure yet. Scientists are still looking into it, but what we do know is that the gut microbiota and the immune system, they have a very close interaction. The gut microbiota helps train the immune system in the early stages of your life, and then it also helps regulate it later on. So a lot of people think that bacteria are something bad, but we have a friendly population of bacteria living within us, living in our guts. And this friendly population of bacteria, we have a sort of symbiotic relationship with them. We help them and they help us. So this healthy and friendly microbiota in the gut, it seems to have a role in helping the immune system learn how to regulate itself. For example, when you first come into the world, you're new to the world and you're learning about all these different things. It's the same thing with your immune system. Your immune system is learning along with you. So this interaction between the gut bacteria and the immune system is sort of like the gut bacteria going, hey, we're here, we're friendly. So this sort of interaction lets your immune system know, hey, not everything is bad. Even if you're bacteria, it doesn't mean that I have to launch an attack against you. It doesn't mean that I have to launch an attack against anything that looks remotely foreign. So your immune system sort of learns of going like, oh, you know what, you're okay. I can leave you alone. You're foreign, but you're safe. And it also goes around going like, oh, this cell looks mutated. It looks wrong. So you're self, but you're not safe, and I will get rid of you. Or it goes, you're foreign and not safe. I will get rid of you too. So it teaches your immune system the subtleties of regulating itself. But when you don't have a healthy gut microbiota, then it has this knock-on effect of your immune system as well. So alterations or imbalances in your gut microbiota can increase the risk of an overreactive immune system, which has been linked to a lot of diseases, including autoimmune diseases. But there's a bright side for this. Since there's no cure for autoimmune diseases, we can focus on what we can do. And one of the things that everyone can do is promote their own healthy population of gut bacteria. And one of the best ways to ensure a healthy gut bacteria is through your diet. And one of the easiest changes people can make to their diet to promote this healthy population of gut bacteria is just eating more fiber. Now, fiber is a nutrient that's only present in plant foods and not in animal products. So your gut bacteria, is nourished on the same food that we eat. And what they really, really love is fiber. So fiber helps keep the bacteria healthy and happy. Now, a lot of people think that probiotics are the way to go. They're wildly popular, but it's not always going to live up to the hype. Your gut microbiota is incredibly complex. Scientists have still not identified all of the different types of microbes that make up your gut bacteria population. It's also incredibly unique. Each person's gut population is so unique, it's like a fingerprint. Now, your microbiota is shaped by the lives you lead, your body's own sort of balance of all the different nutrients or even hormones or even your own unique diets. So the best way to shape a healthy gut microbiota is through the food you eat, not through supplements. But that's not to say that probiotics don't have a role to play. They do have a role to play. For example, if you have diarrhea or you have, really bad upset, it might mean that your bacteria are being overrun by harmful bacteria. And in this case, if you take a probiotic, it means that you're trying to flood out the bad bacteria with good bacteria, and that can help you out in certain situations. But for someone who is otherwise healthy, probiotics aren't the key to building up a healthy population of gut bacteria. You have thousands of different types of bacteria all living in you. And the number of bacteria included in probiotics is just a few strains of healthy bacteria. So it's like a drop in the ocean. It's not quite enough to build up that healthy diversity, that healthy population there. So when it comes to all of this, the best way to build up that healthy population is still through the food you eat, still through the diet that you choose. And our diets, our gut microbiota, and autoimmune diseases, all of this is all linked as well, because we're all living in harmony together with these different bacteria. But when this balance is disrupted, problems will arise. An imbalance of the microbiota has actually been associated with more inflammation and an increased risk of autoimmune diseases. Now, one of the things we really want to look at in gut bacteria is diversity, which is the number of different species present. The more species present, the more diversity. And a diverse gut microbiota is a healthy gut microbiota. Now, autoimmune diseases are becoming more common around the world, but since people haven't changed very much genetically, scientists can say, it's not because of our genes, so it must be other factors. And these other factors are environmental factors, such as changes in our lifestyle and diet. And one of these changes is the consumption of a Western style diet, which is a calorie-rich, fatty diet combined with the sort of lifestyle that a lot of people now lead, just sort of sitting around, not very active all day. This can evoke a state of chronic inflammation in the body, which in turn can contribute to autoimmune diseases. Now, other dietary factors, for example, eating a lot of animal products like red meat and dairy, can increase the levels of something called N-glycolineuraminic acid in your body. Now, this thing, it only comes from your diet because your body can't produce it naturally. And it's been found concentrated within tumors, and it's thought to contribute to body-wide inflammation. Another thing we want to look out for is something called TMAO. It's another compound that can contribute to inflammation. And this compound is released from the interaction between animal products and your gut bacteria. So vegetarians or people who eat less meat, they actually produce less TMAO than people who do eat meat. Research has shown that high levels of TMAO may increase the risk of heart disease, stroke, and even death. Now, the Western diet also tends to be very high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. An excessively high amount of omega-6 results in a sort of high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. That's what we're looking at, this ratio here, and it can promote the development of diseases such as heart disease, cancer, inflammation, and autoimmune diseases. For many people, their high omega-6 comes from the cooking oil they use. A lot of people think that vegetable oils are healthy because they're vegetable oils, but that's not necessarily the case. Now, if you just think about it, when you're cooking at home, right, a lot of people might be picky about their ingredients, but they might be less picky about the type of oil they use. But you just think about it, when you're cooking at home, your oil comes into contact with a lot of your foods, right? So we should be more picky about our oil. And a lot of vegetable oils out there, they have a very unbalanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio with very high omega-6. So what we really want is an oil that has a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, or even more omega-3 than omega-6. So let's have a closer look now into the different types of autoimmune diseases, some of the more common ones. For example, multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease affecting the brain and the spinal cord, also known as the central nervous system. Now, researchers have found that supplementation of non-fermentable fiber in early adulthood helps prevent autoimmune diseases. So it's not out of our control. It is something that we can affect. Fiber alters the composition of our gut microbiota and the metabolic profile and helps lower this inflammatory markers in the blood. And lowered inflammatory markers often correlate with lower levels of inflammation in the body. So this high fiber diet can hopefully help prevent this autoimmunity of the central nervous system. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease of the gastrointestinal tract. What it happens in is it causes all sorts of inflammation there. Now, unfortunately, with Crohn's disease, only 10% of patients achieve long-term remission, meaning that they go a long period of time without any flares or any symptoms. Research has found that patients with Crohn's disease often have a gut microbiota with reduced diversity. So in a case study, a patient with Crohn's disease actually managed to achieve remission and healing of the gut lining, reduction in symptoms after switching to a plant-based diet. As one research notes, this case study supports the idea that food really is medicine. Lupus is another really common one. It causes inflammation throughout the body, affecting multiple different tissues and organ systems. It can affect the brain, heart, lungs, kidneys, joints, blood cells, and the skin. Lupus is strongly linked to the health of your gut and microbiota. Studies have found that people with lupus have less diversity in their gut microbiota compared to people who don't have lupus. In fact, these studies have found that those with more frequent or severe flares of their disease, they actually have the fewest types of bacteria in their gut. Other studies have shown that people with lupus have an imbalance in their gut bacteria with abnormally high amounts of a certain more harmful type of bacteria. Now, other studies, however, have found that if you have lupus, these lupus-prone animals, they did studies on animals, have fewer species of friendly gut bacteria compared to healthy animals. But they found that changing their diet, such as adding dietary fiber, can help shift the gut population towards a healthier direction. Rheumatoid arthritis is when your immune system attacks your joints, causing inflammation. Studies have found a link between the gut microbiota and rheumatoid arthritis. An unhealthy gut microbiota might even act as a trigger for the disease. Now, if you have a decreased risk of decreased intake of fiber, then you have this sort of increased risk of all of this sort of imbalance and this inflammation. But if you have more fiber, you can promote the production of short chain fatty acids in your gut, which can help prevent inflammation. So it is something that we can look into doing. Now, rheumatoid arthritis patients who eat a high fiber diet, they tend to have better physical functioning, less bone loss, and improved quality of life. So really, food really is the best medicine. Many microbiota-linked diseases have skyrocketed over the past few decades, suggesting that it's our change in lifestyle that is sort of pushing this increase in all of these diseases. Now, we already know that a diet low in fiber and gut healthy foods can reduce this diversity, resulting in dysfunction and sort of causing this knock-on effect. But if we eat more fiber, then it can help our gut microbiota and our general health as well. But fiber not only affects our gut microbiota, it can also affect our health in so many other ways, such as helping lower blood sugar levels by helping slow the absorption of sugar. It can help lower cholesterol levels by binding to cholesterol particles, preventing it from being absorbed by our body. Can prevent constipation, and it can reduce caloric intake because high fiber foods, they tend to be very filling, so people tend to eat less, and it can help our immune system as well. Now, currently, there's no cure for autoimmune diseases, but that doesn't mean that we can give up. All it means is that we have to look at other avenues to help our health, to help our body. Now, instead of waiting for the development of a miracle cure or relying on medications with all sorts of side effects, we should take our health into our own hands and strive to prevent these diseases through simple methods like eating more fiber and just changing our diet. Food really is the best medicine.
Dr. E, everyone knows that we need more fiber. Can you tell us about the health benefits of fiber?
So when it comes to fiber, a lot of people will think that, oh, I get enough fiber a day. But when it comes to getting enough fiber is as easy as it sounds. It's really easy, but a lot of people still don't manage to get enough fiber a day. So, what's holding most people back is a misunderstanding or a misconception of what foods contain a lot of fiber and what foods just don't, or maybe just how much fiber they need a day. For example, everyone knows that brown rice is better than white rice, but how many of you choose to eat brown rice more often than white rice? Or getting more fiber is easy. It's totally within our control, and we just have to make the right choices. We just need to have this knowledge to make the right choices. So let me introduce you to one of my favorite sources of fiber, psyllium. Psyllium comes from a certain plant called Plantago ovata. Psyllium contains about 70% soluble fiber and about 30% insoluble fiber. So it contains a good balance of soluble and insoluble fiber because those are two types of fiber that we want. So when it comes to fiber, fiber is indigestible. This means that our body doesn't have a way of breaking it down and absorbing it. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to help us, that it's not going to bring our health all sorts of benefits. It just helps our health in different ways. For example, even though we can't break it down, our gut bacteria can break it down. And what happens with our gut bacteria is that it helps break down all sorts of things that we eat, like fiber. And then by breaking it down, it produces all sorts of metabolites, which we can then absorb and then use to help our health in so many ways. Soluble fiber can dissolve in water to form a sort of gel-like substance. Have you ever had those fiber drinks? You mix it up. If you leave it for a while, it starts turning really thick and really jelly, right? Or if you're like me, you mix up, you forget about it, and then you come back and you have to eat it with a spoon because it's too jelly, right? So it has all sorts of health benefits, like lowering your blood cholesterol, lowering your blood pressure, or helping regulate blood glucose levels. Now, the other type of fiber that we also want to have is something called insoluble fiber, meaning that it doesn't dissolve in water. It can help prevent constipation, which in turn decreases the risk of diseases like diverticulosis and hemorrhoids. Now, when you have a lot of constipation, what happens then is that you start putting all sorts of pressure in your abdomen because you have constipation and you're trying to pass it, right? But when you have all sorts of pressure there, what you're doing is that you're giving yourself, you're increasing the risk of hemorrhoids, which is, causing the veins in the lower part of your rectum to swell and bulge. So this is what hemorrhoids are. It can cause a lot of bleeding, pain, itching, and swelling. Diverticulosis is another one that's also caused by constipation or just having too much pressure in your abdomen. Have you ever blown up a balloon? And if you have one part of the balloon that's sort of weak there, you cause a sort of pouch to form, right? It's the same thing with your colon. When you're putting all sorts of pressure there, the weak parts of your colon wall will just bulge out, causing these little pouches. This is known as diverticulosis. Now, what happens then is that if these pouches, you can often have stuck in these pouches, so you can get very inflamed or infected. All right, and in really bad cases, this infection can form an abscess or it can even rupture. So when it comes to fiber, a lot of us, we don't get nearly enough fiber a day. The daily recommended intake of fiber is about 38 grams a day for men and 25 grams a day for women, and that's a lot of fiber to take in. Ever heard of that saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Well, it should be 10 apples a day keeps the doctor away, because 10 apples with the skin would give you about the 30 grams of fiber you should have in a day. But with our modern diets, most of us, we only get about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, probably even less. Now, a lot of people think that, I'm getting enough fiber a day through foods like white rice or, pasta or bread. Or they might think, what, I'm eating whole wheat bread. That's enough fiber. There's a lot of fiber in whole wheat bread, but that's not actually the case. Things like white rice or bread or pasta, they contain a little bit of fiber, but not quite enough to equal 10 apples worth of fiber. For example, one slice of whole wheat bread, not white bread, whole wheat bread, contains about 1.9 grams of fiber. 100 grams of cooked spaghetti contains about 1.8 grams of fiber. 100 grams of white rice contains about 0.4 grams of fiber. All right, so it's all about making the right choices. It's all about changing our attitudes. Fiber is mostly present in plant foods, not animal foods. So things like meat. Meat does not contain fiber, but things like vegetables and fruits, those are good sources of fiber. So just take a look at our attitudes today. You get a bento box for lunch, and if there's not enough meat, you feel sort of cheated, right? But if there's not enough vegetables, no one says anything. Even if there's not a single vegetable there, people are like, it looks good, right? So it's all about changing our sort of perception of what is good for us and what is not, and just going for those more fiber-rich foods. Now, there's a lot of ways that fiber can help us out. For example, psyllium can help relieve constipation. Now, constipation, I'm sure everyone has suffered through constipation. So how psyllium helps is that it helps by increasing the size and moisture of the stools, which helps it pass quicker and more smoothly. Less constipation means less risk of those diseases I mentioned before, diverticulosis and hemorrhoids. Now, a lot of people will take other foods, such as wheat bran, for example, for constipation, but psyllium actually has a greater effect. Now, another thing psyllium also helps with is diarrhea. Now, you might wonder, how can it help with constipation and diarrhea? How does that work? Now, diarrhea, means loose stools. All right, and constipation means really hard stools. And what psyllium does is that, those fiber drinks, you mix it up, it gets thick, right? Because it's absorbing all of that water. So what happens is you drink that fiber, you drink down that fiber or you eat down that fiber, right? And what happens is that it sort of puffs up inside you. It gathers all this water, becomes nice and jelly. And then your stool is basically just whatever is left behind after the digestive process. So you take in this fiber, you take in this jelliness, and what happens then is sort of like incorporated into your stools, or it reaches your stools and it gives them the moisture that they're lacking. All right, so they become less hard and your body is able to move it out of your system a little bit easier. But when it comes to diarrhea, you got too much liquid there. So what happens then? What happens then is that fiber reaches there, and because it's so jelly, right, it sort of gives your diarrhea more shape. All right, it gives it a little bit more shape. It keeps it together a little bit more. So it's not quite as liquidy. So your stool has a little bit more shape now to get through your body. And then it's not quite so diarrhea. All right, so it sort of helps your stool reach that happy medium of what it should be. Now, psyllium also helps with weight loss. It helps with weight loss in two ways. Number one, psyllium and fiber in general is a very powerful natural appetite suppressant. It can help people feel fuller for longer. Now, having fiber before meals or even during your meals often leads to people just naturally eating less because they're not as hungry. And because they naturally eat less, they just naturally consume fewer calories, which means that it's easier to keep a handle on your weight. Now, there's also evidence showing that it can help reduce the level of hunger hormones in your body, which will help you also just have more control over the appetite, over those hunger pains, and help you keep that feeling of feeling fuller. All right. Now, another thing it also helps with is that it helps you with weight loss by affecting your gut bacteria. Your gut bacteria affects your weight as well. For example, researchers have looked at mice. They looked at fat mice and they looked at skinny mice. When they took the gut bacteria from the fat mice and they put it into the skinny mice gained weight. Right? So your gut bacteria, it has a huge effect on your body and it can even affect your weight. Psyllium helps lower your blood sugar levels as well. So what it helps here is that it helps slow down the digestion of food, which in turn helps regulate your blood sugar levels. All right, if your body is absorbing food slower, this means that the rise in blood sugar is more gentle, more gradual. Rather than being super sharp spike in your blood sugar, what happens is that it's a slow, gentle rise, which is more gentle on your body as well. Psyllium helps lower cholesterol levels. Now, how it does this is that it does it by binding to fat and bile acids, which means that instead of your body reabsorbing the bile acid with the cholesterol, your body will just excrete it instead. It just makes its way outside of your body. So in order to replace your bile acids, because you do need bile acids, what your liver will do is that it will take cholesterol from your blood and be like, I need this to make more bile acids. So it takes the cholesterol and it uses it up to make more bile acids. And because you're using it up, your blood cholesterol will go down. So the recommended intake of fiber is about 30 grams a day. But even if you can't reach that, just increasing it by something small, like 8 grams a day, can have a huge effect on your health. Psyllium also helps reduce blood triglycerides. Harvard Heart Letter showcased a study which found that consuming psyllium on a daily basis can help lower LDL cholesterol, which is a bad type of cholesterol, along with multiple other lipid markers in your blood for heart disease. Now, other journals have shown very similar effects. A high fiber diet can lead to a 15 to 30% reduction in death due to heart disease, and it also reduces the risk of stroke and type 2 diabetes. Now, psyllium also has a prebiotic effect. Now, what's the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic? Prebiotics are things like fiber, things that support your gut population as a whole by just giving them the sort of food, the sort of nutrients they need to maintain itself, to grow itself into a healthy population. Probiotics are things that come sort of after the fact. Probiotics contain friendly gut bacteria, so it's not so much as encouraging your bacteria to maintain its own population, but more just giving it some friendly bacteria. All right, but when it comes to these prebiotics or fiber, another thing that they can give you is that the gut microbiota can ferment the psyllium to produce these health promoting metabolites like short chain fatty acids such as butyrate. You don't really get that with probiotics, only from foods that contain all sorts of these healthy nutrients like fiber. Now, the US FDA has granted psyllium husk this sort of statement, saying that psyllium husk as a source of soluble fiber meets the definition of a dietary fiber based on its effects of reducing the risk of coronary heart disease. Now, the US FDA does not give this label out like willy-nilly. You have to show physiological effects beneficial to human health before the US FDA will grant you this sort of classification as a dietary fiber. So a dietary fiber can help you lower blood sugar levels, lower cholesterol levels, lower your blood pressure, increase the frequency of your bowel movements, increase mineral absorption in the intestines, and reduce your calorie intake. So, here are some tips to help you increase the amount of fiber that you eat. A lot of people, they're sort of put off by eating more fiber because they eat more fiber and then they get these symptoms like bloating or more flatulence. And they think, oh my God, my body's reacting badly. This means that I have to stop. All right. But I'm here to tell you that this bloating, this flatulence, it's normal. All right, it's not harmful and it's even expected. Because what happens then is that, especially if you haven't been eating fiber, if you're the type of person who just doesn't eat a lot of fiber during your life, and then all of a sudden you increase your fiber, what happens then is that you eat all of this fiber, right? And your gut bacteria are just like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is such a treat. Right, and then they start breaking it down really happily, right? They start ramping up their activity. They're breaking down all this fiber. They're making all sorts of nutrients. They're growing as a population. But what happens then is that by breaking it down, they're also releasing gases. And by doing that, you feel like you're getting bloating, that you're getting flatulence. All right, but it's nothing harmful. You can just think of it like your gut bacteria celebrating that you're finally getting more fiber. All right, but if it does bother you, then all you have to do is increase your fiber gradually. Give your body time to adjust because it won't happen, every time you eat fiber. It's just this adjustment period for your body to reach its new normal of finally having more fiber in your diet. But if you're not bothered by the bloating, if you're not bothered by the flatulence, then just go right ahead. It's not harmful. Your body is not reacting poorly and it's not going to hurt you. So it depends on your own personal likes. If it bothers you, then just take it slow and increase it slowly. If it doesn't bother you, then you know what? All the more power to you. Just go right ahead. But another thing you have to remember is that you have to remember to drink a lot of water with your fiber. If you have a lot of fiber but not enough water, it can actually make constipation worse. Another thing that I would recommend for people who have a lot of bloating or flatulence is just take a walk after your meals. Walking and just this exercise can help get everything moving again, even everything inside of you. Now, another thing we want to do is ensure you get your fiber from wholesome plant foods. Because by doing that, if you're eating all sorts of wholesome plant foods, what you're doing is that you're making a change to your diet as a whole. And by doing that, you are getting all sorts of other healthy nutrients with the food that you're eating. Because foods with fiber, they tend to be those healthy foods like fruits and vegetables. And by eating more of those foods, you're getting the fiber that you need, and you're also getting all sorts of other plant nutrients as well.
Dr. E. Confinement is a common practice in Asian countries as a way for a mother to recuperate and recover after birth. but does it have any scientific basis?
All right, so when it comes to this confinement period, we're having a new take on our myth busting portion. All right, and we're going to focus on the confinement period because there's a lot of myths surrounding the confinement period. So let's go through them. The first myth is don't shower. Some people will say you can't even wash your hair. The belief is that water will cause a wind to enter the body and lead to headaches and arthritis later on in life. The truth is that there's no basis to this at all. In fact, bathing regularly ensures good personal hygiene and comfort level. It will reduce the incidence of skin and wound infections as well. You don't even need a special herbal bath or anything like that. In fact, if you have a healing wound, like a surgical wound, it's actually better not to take a bath because you don't want to soak in water. It's okay getting it wet, but you don't want to soak. Okay, so what you want to do is take a refreshing shower, whatever temperature you like the most, use whatever soap you like the most. It's not a problem. Washing your hair is also not an issue at all. If you're like me, I really like taking my showers. It's a really relaxing part of my day, having the shower, using all of my different soaps because they smell so good, right? So I don't want showers to become a source of stress for a new mother, right? It should be a source of relaxation. They can relax in the shower, enjoy the shower, use whatever soap they like the most. All it means is that, they're just keeping clean. And if you enjoy it, then all the more for you. On a personal note, good hygiene is also really kind to the people around you as well. Another myth that surrounds confinement is that you can't drink plain water. The belief is that it increases water retention, which causes the body temperature to decrease and leads to wind entering the body. The truth is that you need to stay hydrated. All right, it's really good for new mothers or really everyone to drink water. Okay, please drink water. In fact, breastfeeding mothers need more water than normal. You do not have to worry about water retention. There's a lot of things that will cause water retention, but drinking water isn't one of them. If you are otherwise healthy and you drink too much water, all that's going to happen is that you're going to go to the toilet more. That's it. All right. Now, a lot of people might notice after giving birth that they do end up going to the toilet more, but that's normal, okay? That's because during pregnancy, because you're growing a baby inside of you, your body is holding on to more water than normal. But after you've given birth, your body is just like, I don't need this extra water anymore. So you just end up going to the toilet more. All right, doesn't mean that something is wrong. It doesn't mean that you are retaining water. All right, so it's really important that new mothers and especially breastfeeding mothers, they stay well hydrated. And one of the healthiest drinks is water. All right, water. It's really healthy for you and it's got 0 calories. So please don't let anyone put you off the idea of drinking water. All right, if you're thirsty, water is a healthy choice, always a good choice. No matter what, water's always a good choice. Another myth is only drink rice wine and other alcoholic drinks. The belief is that it boosts your blood circulation and warms up the body. All right, it's truth. Again, there's no medical reasoning behind this recommendation. So let's break this down, okay? Alcohol does not boost circulation and it does not warm up the body. So then you might say, but I feel warm when I drink. What's up with that? What happens here is that what alcohol does is that it dilates the superficial small vessels on the surface of the skin. So what happens then, it starts bringing more blood to the surface of your skin. All right, so you start flushing. And when you flush or you blush, you feel warm, right? That's the warmth that you're feeling, this sort of flushing, because your blood vessels on the surface are bigger. All right, it doesn't mean that you're actually warmer. In fact, it can have the opposite effect because bringing all this blood to the surface of the body actually cools it down. All right, so rather than getting warmer, you're probably getting cooler. Right. And so if you're breastfeeding as well, it's very important to avoid foods like alcohol because alcohol can be passed to the baby via breast milk, and alcohol can impair the baby's growth and development. Try to avoid cooking with alcohol too. A lot of people think that alcohol is burned off during the cooking process, when in fact, almost 85% of alcohol is still in the food even after boiling the food. All right, and you just have to think, just a little bit might be okay for you, but your baby's so small. A little bit is a lot to them. So it's better just to avoid it entirely, especially if you're breastfeeding. Another myth is that you can't use air conditioning or fans. The belief is that confinement is all about keeping warm and preventing, again, that dreaded wind from entering the body. But the truth is that there's no harm in turning on the air conditioner or using your fan. Being in places like Singapore, it's really hot. It's really humid. It's a miracle if you don't start sweating, if you don't have aircon or a fan. Sweating can irritate wounds and increase the chances of infection. So what happens with wounds is that the golden rule is that you want to keep them clean and dry. So for personal comfort, there's actually no harm in switching on the aircon or the fan. You can even prevent heat rash, not just for you, but for the baby as well, because everyone they tend to wrap up the baby, bundle up the baby because it's really cute that way. But you have to be mindful as well because they can't communicate as well. And they might be feeling really, really hot. All right. Another thing I also feel like I have to mention is that a lot of people, they have this idea that you can't have air cons or fans, or even if you turn it on, you can't have it too cold, or you can't sit directly in the path of the wind because it will give you a cold or make you sick. All right. Being cold does not give you the cold. Let me say that again to be super clear. Being cold does not give you the cold. So it's okay if you want to have your aircon really cold. It's okay if you want to sit right in front of the fan. All right, viruses give you the cold. And since we're all isolating and distancing and keeping away from everyone and everything thanks to the pandemic, the chances of you getting a virus is actually much lower than normal. So when it comes to this, it's just down to personal comfort. You just want to stay comfortable because being a new mother is so stressful as it is. You don't have to skimp out on personal comfort. Another myth is that you can't read or cry. The belief is that childbirth is thought to weaken the liver, which is linked to your eyes. So reading and crying will affect eye health later on in life. The truth is that there's no logic to this whatsoever. You can read, you can cry. Reading doesn't hurt your eyes. Reading in dim light does not hurt your eyes. Reading with a book this close to your face does not hurt your eyes. Watching TV, staring at your computer screen, staring at your phone screen does not hurt your eyes. It might cause eye fatigue, meaning your eyes get really tired and you might feel like, oh, your vision is a bit blurry for a while, but that's just your eyes being tired. It doesn't cause permanent damage, all right? Crying is a good way to relieve stress and deal with the emotions that come with being a new mom. It's all fine, okay? Don't worry about it. If you want to read, then read. If you want to cry, then just cry, okay? It's all perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about it hurting your eyes. So that's one less worry there. Another myth is that you have to consume more ginger and different herbs. The belief is that you need to restore ki or energy after childbirth. So it's good to consume these different herbal dishes to boost energy and blood circulation. It's also supposed to boost breast milk production. But the truth is that it's okay to eat ginger, but you should be more careful with other herbs. Some herbs can contain high levels of heavy metals and pesticides. Some herbs are medicinal and may pass to the baby via breast milk. And when it comes to increasing breast milk supply, there's not really any specific food that will do that for you. A lot of people will talk about eating oats, alfalfa, fennel, pumpkin, papaya, etc. to boost breast milk supply. But there's not enough evidence showing that it will. But what is more important is for the mom to eat a balanced diet full of plenty of wholesome foods and drink enough water. Okay, that is what is going to help with breastfeeding and the mom's health in general. Another myth is that you want to only eat meat, liver, and herbs. The belief is that such foods warm up the body and provide protein and iron. The truth is that moderate consumption is fine, just like it would be for anyone else. But just like for anyone else, new moms should not restrict themselves to only eating these foods. All right? It's fine as a treat every once in a while, but it should not make up the majority of your diet. There's a lot of cholesterol in these foods. For example, meat in general contains about 77 milligrams of cholesterol per 100 grams. 100 grams of meat is not a lot. For liver, for every 100 grams, it contains about 549 milligrams of cholesterol. That's a lot. That's more than your daily limits. All right. A lot of people think that you need extra or something extra after birth, but in fact, you really don't. Just focus on eating a normal, healthy diet, and that's enough. You're going to get all the nutrients you need in a healthier way. I mean, just look at vegetarians. They don't eat any meat at all. And even after giving birth, they do perfectly fine. So it's not so much of eating a lot of meat or liver or herbs or anything special. It's more about having a wholesome, healthy diet. The last myth is that you shouldn't walk or move about. The belief is that doing this, walking or moving about, can increase muscle weakness after giving birth, when in truth, it will actually have the opposite effect. If you don't use your muscles, you lose them. So if you don't move around, if you just sit around all day, then, yeah, it's really comfortable. But it means that you're going to get increased muscle weakness. Okay, even if you have a C-section, it's still recommended that you get exercise. Walking and moving about decreases the risk of blood clots in your legs, also known as deep vein thrombosis. For people with healthy pregnancies, it's actually recommended to exercise throughout the pregnancy and after childbirth. Exercise is not dangerous for the baby. In fact, mothers who exercise tend to experience less problems with pregnancy and labor. After childbirth, you can start gentle exercise pretty much immediately. All right, you don't really have an excuse to just lay around all day. If you've had a C-section, you have a little bit of an excuse, and only that it means is that you have to be kind to the surgical wound. But all that means is that you can't do heavy, heavy weightlifting, can't do high impact exercises, and you can't do, a lot of sit-ups, a lot of crunches, because that puts too much stress for your wound there. But it doesn't mean that you can't get your exercise in other ways. So still not an excuse for not getting exercise. So hopefully when it comes to these myths, when it comes to pregnancy or childbirth or new moms, it's all about just taking care of yourself generally. And a lot of that advice is universal. So it's things like drink plenty of water, eat plenty of wholesome plant foods, and get plenty of exercise.
Now we will be answering some questions from the audience. If you have any questions related to health that you would like to ask Dr. EE, please leave your comment in the live chat section. Dr. EE, what is your definition of the Western diet? Also, for anemics, is it okay to eat more red meat?
So the Western diet is often defined as a sort of diet that is very high in these fatty foods, very high in red meats, and very high in processed foods. For example, for a lot of us, you go out to the supermarket and a lot of us will buy these ready-made meals, or instead of getting, wholesome bread or wholesome foods, they will get, they just get like all of these, like sausages or bacon or things like that, which is delicious, right? But not very healthy for us. So the Western diet is just this trend of going towards all of these foods combined with a sort of lifestyle that means sitting around a lot and just not getting a lot of exercise. All right, so it's in contrast with other types of eating patterns. All right, it's often called the Western diet because it's more common in Western countries like America or even the UK. You think of the typical American foods. Just think of the stereotype of American foods, all of the unhealthy stuff, and that is pretty much what the Western diet is all about. So we want to avoid those sorts of foods. It's fine if you have it as a treat every so often, but I'm sure everyone would say, if you have a Big Mac every day for every meal, that's not healthy for you. All right, it's okay if you have it once in a while, but having it all the time is just not healthy. So it's more about moving away from this pattern of eating and moving more towards a pattern of eating where we want to eat more of the wholesome plant foods, move away from meats, even red meats or other types of meats, and look more towards, fruits and vegetables. Even when you're anemic, a lot of people think that anemia is the end all. Anemia is a symptom. It is not a diagnosis. So when it comes to anemia, you have to look at, okay, what is causing the anemia? And you have to treat that cause. All right. If you just look at eating more iron, you're not really addressing the root cause of the issue there. And in that sense, all it means is that you're just, putting a Band-Aid on the problem. All right, so there's a lot of causes of anemia. And so when it comes to anemia, you got to find out what is causing the anemia and you got to fix that problem. All right, but if you want to get more iron in your diet, yes, you can get it from red meats or other animal products. But a lot of plant foods will also contain iron as well. So it's perfectly possible to get all the iron you need from plant foods. All right, one of my personal favorite sources of iron from plant foods is that, that type of spinach that looks red? I really like that spinach because it's really colorful as well. It's got that green and it's red, but it's got a lot of iron in it as well. All right, so if you want to eat red meat, all right, you can do that as well. But you just have to just be aware of the fact that red meat, it contains a lot of more unhealthy nutrients, like a lot of saturated fats or a lot of cholesterol as well. So if you want a healthier source of iron, you can look towards plant foods because plant foods, they do contain iron, and it's perfectly possible for your body to get all of the iron and other minerals it needs from plant foods.
Dr. E, does psyllium inhibit the absorption of nutrients?
So there's a lot of news going around so far, or a lot of people thinking that, psyllium helps reduce the absorption of cholesterol by binding to things like bile acids. But does that mean that it binds to other stuff as well? Does it mean that we won't be able to absorb nutrients as well? And then there's other news as well saying that, psyllium or fiber is an anti-nutrient, meaning that it will help prevent your body from absorbing all of these other nutrients. But it's actually a lot more complicated than you think, all right? You don't really have to worry about psyllium interfering with your ability to absorb nutrients, okay? Now, if you just look at our current diet, we are super blessed to live in a wealthy country like Singapore. We are super blessed to be able to get if we want food, all we need to do is just walk into a supermarket and get food. We don't have a food shortage. We're not in the middle of a famine. And for most of us here, our issues with our health is that we're getting too much food. All right, just look at the #1 killer in the world. It's heart disease. And one of the major contributing causes to heart disease is things like high cholesterol, too much saturated fat. We are overweight or obese, and all of these things will contribute to things like heart disease. And what do all of these things have in common? It all boils down to the food that we eat. All right. So for most of us, we don't have to worry about us not getting enough nutrients. In fact, we have to worry about getting the right nutrients. And fiber isn't going to hinder our goal in that. In fact, if we change our diet into a pattern that contains more fiber, we're actually doing ourselves a favor because of fiber-rich foods tend to be, nutrient-rich. All of these vegetables, all of these fruits, they are nutrient rich and a valuable source of nutrients. All right. So if we avoid these foods because they have fiber, then you're sort of doing yourself a disservice here. You got to look at everything as a whole. All right. Now, it's only a problem if you are starving, if you are malnourished and you eat ridiculous amounts of fiber. All right, then you maybe might have a problem there. All right, but even then, if that is still your only source of food, then it's still a fine source to eat. But for many of us here, fiber is not going to have any effect on our nutrients. It's not going to give us a nutrient deficiency. It's not going to interfere with our health in general. In fact, it's going to help our health because fiber-rich foods are rich in nutrients. So if we make that sort of change in our diet, we are doing good by our body and we're not doing our body harm.
Dr. EE, can you tell us about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and how we might prevent it? Is there a genetic component? Also, does chest pain indicate heart problems? What is the best way to take care of our heart? And why would our pulse suddenly increase even though we're not doing anything? Should we be worried if it spikes randomly over 100? What can we do to lower it?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Let me break that down. Hypertrophic means thick. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Cardiomyopathy means disease of the heart muscle. So what it means is that for most heart diseases, what happens is that you lose muscle weakness. Your heart muscle, it can't pump properly. So it's sort of like fluttering, not quite, that strong pump that you're looking for your heart muscles. For most heart diseases, it is like that. Your heart muscle is too thin, it's weak. You've had a heart attack somewhere, so part of it is scar tissue and not muscle. All right, but with hypertrophic heart disease, what happens is your muscle wall is too thick. You have too much heart muscle, and people might think, oh, isn't that a good thing? Don't you need muscle for your heart to pump? Right? What happens with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is that, yes, you have a lot of muscle there, but what happens then is that your heart can't relax properly. And if your heart can't relax properly, it means that your heart can't refill with blood. And if your heart doesn't refill with blood, it still means that it's not pumping properly. So there's two components to your heart disease, the functioning of the heart. The first one is that your heart must be able to relax properly, has to be able to fill up with blood. And after it fills up with blood, then it has to be able to pump it all out. All right. Most heart diseases is that pumping problem, which is a problem. All right. But for hypertrophic heart disease, the main problem there is that it's not filling properly. And if it's not filling properly, you still get problems because your heart can't function right. All right, hypertrophic heart disease is the type of heart disease that that people always link to athletes. If you work out super hard and you go super hard for yourself, athletes are always working out, right? They're growing muscle everywhere. But if you work out your heart too hard, you can get something called hypertrophic heart disease, which is too much heart muscle. Now, there may be a genetic component to this. Some people just end up having it. Okay, but for all of these things, it's just about, doing everything in moderation. I always say that things like exercise is healthy for you, but that also exists in moderation as well. For people who go super hard, it is going to have detrimental health effects. They're going to lose too much fats in their body. That's also unhealthy for you. You're going to be going too hard on your joints. A lot of professional athletes, even, they end up with joint problems later on in life because they're way too hard on their joints. It's probably worth it for them, but they do end up with other health issues later on in life. Or, you might end up with other heart or other health issues elsewhere in your body by working it out too hard. But with some people, they just end up having it, and we're not quite sure why. There may be a genetic component to it. It may be because, they were going too hard at it. But when it comes to this sort of heart disease, it's an interesting one because it's too thick instead of too thin. All right, but for most people, when it comes to preventing heart disease, the vast majority of heart disease is something called coronary artery disease. Okay, so your heart has its own blood supply, which is your coronary blood vessels, because like every other muscle in your body, you need oxygen to your heart. All right, so every time your heart pumps out, it's also pumping itself its own blood supply. So it pumps out and it pumps out blood going into the coronary vessels that feed the muscles of your heart. So the vast majority of heart disease happens when these vessels get blocked. And when these vessels get blocked, it means that your heart muscle isn't getting enough oxygen. Right? If you ever had, you can do a sort of experiment at home for yourself to see how that feels like. If you tie something really tight around your arm, prevents your blood from getting there, and just make a fist. Just make a fist really, really fast and keep going, or just squeeze a stress ball. After a while, your muscles really start to ache. They start to really hurt. Okay? And if you just let off that tight tie you have here, all of a sudden, all that pain goes away because your muscle is suddenly being resupplied by oxygen. Right? But it's the same thing with your heart there. That sort of pain that comes with heart attacks, it's because your heart isn't getting enough oxygen. It gives you that sort of pain there. All right. So, but unlike your arm, if you get that arm there, you can just stop, right? But your heart can't stop. So all that happens is that you get that sort of pain, but your heart can't stop. It has to keep going to keep you alive. It has to keep going. So what happens then is that your heart tries all sorts of ways to get around it. It might form new vessels, or you start getting issues with your heart muscle dying off because you're not getting enough oxygen there. So your heart starts to dilate because your heart muscle dies off. It's replaced by scar tissue. And scar tissue can't contract. It doesn't contribute to the pumping of your heart. It can actually interfere with the function of your heart. And the best way to prevent this coronary heart disease is through diet and exercise. One of the main contributing causes to the sort of coronary heart disease is your diet. You have too much cholesterol. You're eating too much saturated fat. You're eating fried chicken every day. You're not exercising. You're gaining weight. And if you have other diseases like diabetes or you smoke, you're just increasing the risk of coronary heart disease. All right, so it's all these sorts of lifestyle factors that we can all prevent. Okay, so the number one killer in the world is something that a lot of us can prevent. Okay, so it all comes down to the diet and our exercise. We want to focus on a healthy diet. We want to eat more plant foods. Okay, we want to eat more plant foods, more vegetables, more fruits. When you go to the supermarket, your cart should be a colorful mess of fruits and vegetables, and maybe a tiny corner over there you can have your meat. Okay, but the vast majority of your diet should be fruits and vegetables, and you should be getting moving every day. Okay, I'm not saying that you have to run a marathon, but just start moving every day. There's some research showing that just sitting around every day is as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes. Okay, so we want to get up, we want to move around. Just walking a little bit is good enough. Okay, and if we just walk a bit more, then you might find it in you to start exercising a bit more, sort of get the ball rolling to more and more exercise. Okay, and if you have other diseases like diabetes, it's super important to get hold of your blood sugar, because diabetes is a significant contributor to not only blocking your heart vessels, but blocking vessels in other areas of your body as well. If you smoke, you should really stop smoking. All right, and when it comes to pain in the chest, not all pain in the chest is heart disease. Okay, the classic presentation of heart disease is this sort of crushing pain, this sort of breathless crushing pain that radiates down your left arm or up into your jaw. All right, but actually a minority of heart attacks present in that way. For some people, especially women, women can present with heart attacks differently than men do. So it's important to keep in mind all of the different ways that it can present. For some people, they don't even get pain. They might just feel a little bit breathless. All right, but so it really depends, but it doesn't mean that every pain in your chest is heart pain. All right, you have a lot of other things in your chest as well. You have lungs, you have your ribs there, and you have muscles there as well. And especially if you're a young person and you get this sort of sharp stabbing pain in your chest, a lot of people have asked me before, does that mean that I have a heart issue? All of a sudden I feel like I can't get a full breath because it's just this sharp pain in my chest. It's not your heart. It's something called a precordial catch, and it's 100% harmless. All right, most people will get it. It's just a sudden sharp stabbing pain and it goes away. Okay, it's not harmful. For other people, it might just because, they bruise themselves. It might be musculoskeletal pain, of pain in the muscle somewhere. All right, so it's not every pain in your chest that is heart pain. But one of the indicators of heart pain is the other symptoms that go along with it. So the nature of the pain, what sort of pain is it? I've heard people describe it like they have, they have a weight pressing down on their chest. It's sort of a crushing pain. That's how I've heard people describe it. Or they can't catch their breath anymore. They start to feel really dizzy, not quite themselves. It's the other symptoms that go along with it that make you start to think, this might be their heart. And it's also the other things as well. For example, the person is 70 years old, diabetic, hasn't been taking care of themselves, has a history of, having blood vessel problems in their hearts, all sorts of things, that you put it together and that makes you think, it's heart pain. It's not just 100% pain in your chest, it's pain in your heart. Okay, so don't be too worried about pain in your chest automatically equaling heart pain. You have to look at all of the other things as well, and all of the other things, they all contribute to make a fuller picture of what exactly is going on there. All right. So another question that you were asking was sudden increases in your heart rate, right? So your heart rate is not stable for most of the day. It always goes up and down. All right, and it's not just in response to exercise. All right, it can go up and down in response to your emotional states. For any of you who wear a heart rate monitor like me, you might you watch a horror movie. Right, you look back at the recording and you just see your heart rate going like this. All right, so that's actually okay. That's perfectly normal. All right, but if you get it all the time, these random spikes to 200 beats a minute, 300 beats a minute, 100 plus beats a minute, and you're worried that it might be something there, you can go out and get it checked out by the doctor, because there is a heart condition called atrial fibrillation. Well, a lot of people think that atrial fibrillation means that you have a irregular heartbeat all the time, but for some people it's intermittent. Sometimes the heart rate is normal, and then all of a sudden they might have a spike in the heart rate, or they have like a sudden increase in an irregular heart rate. All right, that's rare, but you can go to the doctor and have it checked out. And how they usually check it out is that they have you wear one of their more sophisticated heart rate monitors for a period of time, hoping to catch that rhythm in action. All right, but for most people, you can just think of other causes that might have caused it. Were you reading something, on the internet, or you were seeing a post that made you go, or you're doing something there. A lot of things can contribute to your heart rate going up and going down. All right, but if you're concerned, you can always go to your doctor and tell them, hey, I've noticed that this is happening, and they might recommend that you just wear a heart rate monitor and monitor that, hoping to catch that abnormal heart rate in action and see whether or not it is something to be concerned about, or it's just your heart rate increasing.
Dr. EE, can we take Panadol and paracetamol after getting the vaccine when we experience symptoms such as a headache, fever, or muscle pain? Will this affect the efficacy of the vaccine? Also, can we take the mRNA vaccine during the first trimester of pregnancy? If we delay taking the second dose of the vaccine for a few months after the first dose, will it work just as well? Is it true that after taking the vaccine, we can't do cardio workouts for at least a week?
All right, so the first one is, can you take Panadol or paracetamol after getting your vaccine? So for some people, they will end up with side effects like body aches, headache, feeling feverish after the vaccine. If you do have these sort of symptoms, it's safe to take Panadol or ibuprofen after your vaccine. All right, it's not going to mean that your vaccine isn't going to work as well for you, okay? Your vaccine is still going to work. You're still going to be protected. All it means is that you don't have to suffer through these side effects unnecessarily. All right, so if you want to, please feel free to make yourself more comfortable and take your Panadol or your ibuprofen. There's some reports going around, or some people saying that, oh, these medications will dampen the inflammatory response and lead to your vaccine not working as well. But in reality, all of that is very theoretical. In reality, it's unlikely to make any sort of difference at all. All right, so your vaccine is gonna work, hopefully. All right, so there's always a tiny percentage of people for whom the vaccine will not work, but for the vast majority of us, the vaccine will work. All right, and if you take Panadol or ibuprofen, it's not going to affect how well your vaccine is gonna work. So it's all right. You know, if you're feeling unwell after getting your vaccine, it's all right to take the medications and feel a little bit better. When it comes to pregnancy, all right, so far they don't have any, when they did these clinical trials for the vaccines, they did not include pregnant women because most clinical trials will not include pregnant women for ethical reasons. We do not experiment on pregnant women. So according to their clinical trials, they don't have that sort of robust data on pregnant women and how the vaccine will interact with them. But if you look at the guidelines of other countries, for example, the CDC in America says that pregnant women can get the vaccine and it shouldn't cause any harm as well. In fact, a lot of pregnant women in other countries have received the vaccine and it doesn't seem to have any side effects so far. So if you are pregnant, it's always good to follow your own country's guidelines and to meet up with your doctor if you have any concerns over whether or not you want to get the vaccine. But if you are going for the vaccine, then go for it. As long as you are comfortable with it. If you don't want to go for the vaccine, that's perfectly fine as well. It's always good to follow your own country's guidelines and to get the recommendations of your personal doctor because they will know your own situation the best. When it comes to getting the vaccine, when it comes to the time between the doses, we want to stick as close to the recommended time period as close as possible. For example, the time period for Pfizer is about 3 weeks. For the Moderna vaccine, it's about 4 weeks. All right, we want to stick to that time period because that is the time period they showed when they were doing their research. So this is the time period where they know, okay, according to the data we have, it is effective at this time. All right, so we want to aim for that time period. But if you can't help it and you delay it by a few weeks, you can still get the second dose. All right, it doesn't mean that you can't get the second dose. All right, you can still get the second dose. All they're saying is that they're being very safe. They're saying that, we don't know exactly what the numbers will be if you delay it by, this amount of time. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get it. And it doesn't mean that it won't be effective as well. There's data showing that it will still work for you. All right. And getting that second dose is better than not getting it at all. But in an ideal situation, in an ideal world, we should aim for the closest time period in which they did their trials on, because that is the time period where we have the most information about. Did I miss a question?
Dr. EE, is it true that after taking the vaccine, we cannot perform cardio workouts for at least a week?
So there's some reports, especially for young men, that they get heart inflammation after getting the vaccines. So as a precautionary measure, a lot of people are recommending that for these young men, they just refrain from doing strenuous exercise for about a week after the vaccine. Now, while it is a very, very rare side effect, it is something that we do want to keep an eye on, and we do want to, we want to be safe rather than sorry. All right. So if you're getting the vaccine, then you can just refrain from strenuous exercise for a period of time. The recommendation is currently about a week after the vaccine. So just follow the recommendations and just use it as an excuse to just take it easy for a while. And when they mean strenuous exercise, they mean exercises that causes your heart rate to go up. So you don't want to go running, you don't want to go, you don't want to lift heavy weights or do, laps around the pool, things like that. But things like, taking a walk outside, walking your dog, doing other things, all of that is fine. So it's not an excuse to be a couch potato, but it is an excuse to maybe, put off your workout routine for just a week.
Dr. E, will taking more fiber help alleviate frequent gastric pain?
So when it comes to frequent gastric pain, there are so many things that can cause the gastric pain. For example, when it comes to gastric pain, you got to go to the root of the problem. What is causing your gastric pain? Do you have an ulcer? Do you have a food intolerance? Do you have irritable bowel syndrome? Do you have other sorts of inflammatory conditions? Do you have gastritis? Is it something else that is irritating the lining of your stomach? You got to go to the root issue, all right? So once you address the root issue, then you can start addressing the source of your gastric pain. All right, but if you have things like an inflammatory bowel disease, or even if you have irritable bowel syndrome, there is some research showing that having a high fiber diet can help with the symptoms of these sorts of diseases. Okay, so having a high fiber diet is just very healthy for your gut in general. But if your gastric pain is caused by something like gastritis, or you have a peptic ulcer, or you have, something else there, then fiber isn't necessarily going to help with your pain. Okay, healing the ulcer or treating the gastritis, something like that, that is going to help with your pain. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat fiber. Fiber is always going to be good for your gut, and it's not going to make your pain worse. All right, but when it comes to gastric pain, you really got to look at, okay, what's the cause of my pain? If it's something like inflammatory bowel disease or like irritable bowel syndrome, it might help. All right, but it's something else like an ulcer there or gastritis or food intolerance or something like that, then that's not going to help with your pain. All right, so it really depends on what the pain is caused by.
Due to time constraints, the next question will be our last question. Dr. E, do you have any advice on addressing leaky gut?
So leaky gut syndrome. Okay, first I should explain what leaky gut syndrome for those of you who don't know. So normally when it comes to our gut, the lining of our gut has tight junctions because it's supposed to control what makes its way from the gut contents into our blood supply. All right, so normally your intestine is very picky about what it lets into the gut supply. It's only like, okay, these nutrients are okay, these proteins are okay, these things are okay, everything else has to go out, it has to exit the body. I don't want it. Right? What happens with leaky gut is that these junctions start breaking down. You start getting holes in your defenses. And what happens then is that larger particles from the intestinal contents will be absorbed into the blood supply. All right, because it makes its way past this barrier function of your intestines. Right? What happens then is that it has a sort of knock-on effect on the rest of your body, because the goal of your gut is to only allow certain things through and to only allow things of a certain size through. So only fully digested material should be able to make its way past. But when you have this breakdown of the barrier, then you have incompletely digested particles making its way through, and that will cause issues because these incompletely digested particles are larger than normal and they're more foreign, and then your immune system will go like, you are not supposed to be here, and it launches an attack against these particles. So This is why a lot of experts believe that this leaky gut syndrome contributes to system-wide inflammation because it's letting things in that really should not have been let into your body. All right, so a lot of what is causing leaky gut syndrome is this imbalance in your gut microbiota. Your gut microbiota not only helps you with your immune system, but it also helps maintain the integrity of your intestinal wall, maintain this integrity of the barrier there. All right, because what happens then first is that, if you have your intestinal contents here, you have this layer, this mucus layer with your bacteria. Right, and then underneath you have your intestinal wall, the mucous membrane of your intestinal wall there. All right, so your bacteria are sort of like the first line defense. If you have imbalance of your gut bacteria there, what happens then is that they can't help you anymore in helping maintain that barrier function. So it's sort of another gap in your defense, and harmful things from your intestines can sort of start damaging the walls that are causing inflammation. Another thing that also contributes to it is that, there's also an interaction between the healthy gut bacteria and the cells of your intestinal wall. So this interaction between these two helps make sure that the cells keep this nice tight junction there. But when your bacteria is the unhealthy sort of bacteria, or the pathogenic sort of bacteria that is causing disease rather than helping you out, then you lose this sort of communication there. You lose the sort of friendly interaction, and it starts becoming a hostile interaction instead, which will harm the cells there and also help break down that barrier function of your intestine. Another thing that helps break it down is the sort of food that we eat. If we eat a lot of foods, for example, if we have a really high imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3, the sort of inflammatory food, then what happens then is that we get inflammation there in your intestinal wall as well, and that also breaks it down. All right, so a lot of what goes on there is also within our control. So if you want to help prevent a leaky gut, a lot of it comes down to the food that we eat. Like everything I mentioned before, one of the most important foods that you want to eat is fiber, because fiber helps keep this gut bacteria population happy and healthy. And when you have a happy and healthy gut bacteria, then these bacteria, they interact with your intestinal cells in a healthy way. They interact with your immune system in a healthy way. They help, promote that barrier function of your intestinal wall. So everything is working as it should, because everything works together. All right. So another thing you want to do is that you want to take a good look at your diet as well. You want to, balance that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Stop eating all of these really inflammatory foods, all of these unhealthy foods. You want to look more towards your wholesome plant foods. Because if you do that, then you're getting all sorts of nutrients there, all sorts of plant nutrients, and you're getting a lot of fiber. All right. And another thing that fiber will do is that when your gut bacteria breaks it down, it will break down that fiber into all sorts of metabolites. And all of these metabolites are also really good for your intestine as well, and for your general health. So all sort of links together. You want to eat your healthy food because it helps you avoid these inflammatory foods. And you also want to keep that balance of omega-6 to omega-3 1-to-1. And you want to eat a lot of fiber to help keep your gut bacteria healthy. So there's all sorts of ways that we can tackle this problem of inflammatory gut. And all of them is all within our control.
Thank you, Dr. EE, for taking your time to educate us regarding health today.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope it was both informative and entertaining.
Thank you all for watching. This video will be accessible until July 14th, 9 a.m. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye.